The Stafford Gambit has been promoted by con men, charlatans, and hucksters, trying to make you think that this is a good system. Well, it's even worse than you think. And in this video, I am going to give you a clear-cut and simple refutation to the Stafford Gambit, one that doesn't involve having to sidestep a bunch of cheapo tactics. I hope you enjoy the video. Let's begin. Of course, the Stafford Gambit begins after e4, e5, knight f3, and knight to f6. And this is one of the tricky parts of the Stafford Gambit. Black is beginning with the Petrov's defense, which is usually a very sort of equalized first kind of system, one that is not too sharp. But after knight to e5, the main move in this position, Black plays knight to c6, a rare move introducing the Stafford Gambit. And when White takes the knight on c6, as White should, and Black recaptures with the d-pawn, now it appears that Black has some very, very comfortable and convenient play for their pieces. Now, the first step in this refutation is to play the move d3 to strengthen and solidify this e4 pawn. Now, some have advocated the move e5, and technically this is better. The problem is, when Black plays knight to e4, White still has to deal with a couple of cheapo tricks, and after knight to d5, say d4, c5, White is better, but not quite as good as I would like White to be. So in the line I'm going to show you, White's even better off than that. So the first thing to remember is to play d3 to solidify this structure in the center. When Black plays bishop to c5, and they pretty much all do play bishop to c5 here, the next principle is put into play, and that is you want to control this g4 square. All the Black's tactics seem to revolve around this knight being on g4. So the first move, bishop to e2, controlling this g4 square so the knight can't land on it. Now, some may be thinking, well, can't the knight go there anyway? Well, yeah, you can play knight to g4 here, but after bishop g4, queen g4, h4, excuse me, then you can play g3. The maximalist approach is queen to f3, but you don't want to learn all that. Just play g3, and after queen takes, queens are exchanged, h3 kicks the bishop away, king to e2, and White is just completely winning this endgame with a beautiful extra pawn and a full pawn center. So that doesn't really do anything. So what Black does, again, almost exclusively, is play this sneaky move, h5. Black really wants that knight to land on g4, and we're really not going to let him do it. So we're going to recommend the move h3 already right now. You don't want to play that after the knight is landed, because Black won't necessarily have to move that knight. He can create sacrificial possibilities. So you play h3 before the knight is landed on that square. The main line here is c3. Now, again, White is better here, but Black has a long string of tricks. For example, look at this variation. Knight goes to g4, so White builds the full pawn center and thinks everything's right with the world, but Black just ignores the threat against the bishop and plays queen to h4, threatening queen f2, g3 to stop that, but then queen to f6, another threat, f3, and now instead of moving the knight, h4, fg4, and now fg3. Threatening queen to f2 check and also taking advantage of the pin along the h-file. And if White plays the most natural move on the board, rook to f1, Black ignores the threat to the queen and just takes on h2. And this is actually an equal position already. The best move here instead is bishop to e3. But again, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we have to find only moves to survive. So we just play h3 immediately and just say the knight, you are not coming into g4. That's the first principle. Now, when Black plays queen to d4 here, which is the next idea, threatening queen to f2, we don't castle. It's important not to castle on the king's side. That's an important principle for White. Don't castle on the king's side. Instead, just go ahead and play the rook to f1. Defend it that way, because what we're going to do is we're going to castle long. We're going to build up in the center and castle long. So bishop e6, and at this point, things become quite a bit easier for White. c3, it's the queen, queen to d7, and now d4 builds that full pawn center. If the bishop goes to b6, a natural move, you play queen to c2. We do have to remember that once we play d4, The pawn on e4 is hanging to the knight here at f6. So queen to c2, though, defends that quite comfortably. Black castles long, then just bishop e3, say rook h to g8 to support a g-pawn advance, but we're not moving to the king's side. Knight to d2, g5, and long castle. And here white is just completely winning. It's not even close. An extra pawn, a beautiful center, and black has no attack whatsoever. If instead black plays bishop to e7, then again, queen to c2, we got to remember to defend the e-pawn. And there's this one idea of the knight can take on e4, but this basically gives black nothing. This is the only diversion from the last line we just looked at. Queen e4, bishop to d5. The idea is black's going to pick up the g2 and h3 pawns. Queen c2, bishop g2, rook g1, bishop h3. But remember, black already sacrificed a pawn. And what that means is, although he just picked up 3 pawns, he's only up 2 pawns for a whole piece. So bishop to e3, g5, knight to d2, say hits the queen with bishop f5, just move, long castle, long castle. And here again, white has an extra knight. Black has no tricks and isn't even close to winning. So let's look at our method one more time. The first principle is you play d3 to solidify and strengthen that center. Then we make 2 moves in a row to make sure the knight does not land on g4. Bishop e2, then h3. So the knight doesn't even get to land on the square. Then when they attack the f2 square, we don't castle. We play rook to f1 because we're going to castle long. And then we can proceed with our normal strategy of building up in the center against the queen with tempo, c3, d4. And the only really thing we have to remember at the end is just make sure the e-pawn is defended. And then the position basically plays itself. A full pawn center and no tricks. So that should take care of the pain in the rear that the Stafford Gambit has been in our chess lives. Thank you for joining us at Chess Dog. See you again soon. Bye.